All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Breakfast with Benefits. I'm Mary Preenon. I'm the Director of Communications for the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors, and today we have our friends from Allen Block Insurance here with us. They're going to tell us how insurance issues, which ones could kill a sale. And today with me, we have Joanne Murray and Neil Bush. And Joanne is the president, Neil is vice president. And I would like to welcome you both and thank you for all the information that we're going to get today. And as I said, we are recording this and we can send this out to everyone after the presentation. So Joanne and Neil, thank you. Take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. The insurance process has become much more difficult this year. And, it can definitely create some unforeseen complications with a sale of a property. So we want to take some time today to go through what we're seeing happening in the insurance industry and how that's impacting all of you. And then hopefully you'll come away with some things that, can help you prepare a seller for what could happen. Insurance rates have been skyrocketing, and I'm sure many of you see that when your renewals come in. And it's industry wide. This isn't any one insurance company. This is the entire industry. And the insurance companies, as a result of this, they've become much more restrictive. And so they have, where they weren't so fussy about a roof before, they weren't so fussy about a railing on steps, they're getting much fussier about what they will take. So this is some of the things we're going to talk about. And because of this, things like the flood zones and prior claims and, certain building features, it's just making it much harder for us. Every day we're scrambling to find markets, to fix problems, and it's definitely it will impact all of you at some point. So again, this is what we hope to cover today. So let's talk a little bit about why insurance rates are going up, because this is probably something you all want to know too. And the change in weather patterns probably is the largest thing, but it's not the only thing. We've all seen much more severe weather patterns, more storms. The rain, when it does come, seems to be more torrential than we used to see. The increased cost of materials. If any of you have tried to do any construction, you'll see that materials have increased dramatically. And along with that, when you finally do pick out what you want for materials, you'll find that there's a delay in getting them. I have one claim right now that I've been working on that occurred January of 22. He just got the wood floors in so that he can finally, do the repairs. So the delays, it's fine if you want to settle for something, but sometimes people want what they have. And so that's causing major delays. The increased cost of longer timeframes to settle the claim impacts the rates. And you say, well, why would that impact it? Well, let's go back to that claim that happened in January of 22. And he's been waiting for these floors, and it happens to be a home out in the Hamptons, and he rents it out from June through October. Well, guess what? He couldn't rent it out last year. And that caused a $350,000 loss of rent claim for the insurance company. So it's not just the materials. It's not just finding a contractor who will come out and do the repairs. All of these things are causing the insurance companies to spend more money. That causes the rates to go up. And then the last factor is the reinsurance. And that's a term many of you may not be familiar with, but insurance companies actually have a ceiling as to how much they can risk. So when they get to that ceiling, then they act insurance from what's called a reinsurer. And those reinsurers have investors who invest money and they bet that the weather pattern will be good and they bet that they will make a certain amount of money. And so the reinsurance market is what gives our insurance companies a safety net so that they don't, incur costs more than they bring in. But what's happened is the reinsurance market, because of all these changes, is losing money. The investors, they're not so sure they want to invest. So then the reinsurers have to raise their rates. So now your insurance company is paying more money for their insurance to protect you. And all of these factors is what's causing your insurance rates to go up. So that's just a little bit of background about why the insurance rates are going up, because when your customer goes out to get an insurance quote and comes back and says, wow, I can't believe how much this is costing, you'll have a little more insight as to why this is happening. And we're really finding that when we explain it to people and they realize why it's happening, that it's a little more palatable, because it's not just that the insurance companies are greedy and want to make more money. Some of that does happen, though. I won't give them a whole lot of credit. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Neil. He's going to talk to you about why insurance companies may not want to write certain policies, certain homes.
Great. Mary, any questions so far? Okay, so.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. No, we don't have any yet.
Okay, great. So this is just what I'm going to do is just give you a summary of some of the things that we've seen, given our experience over the last 3-4 years. We represent 12 different insurance companies. And when your buyer purchases a home and insures it, the company within the first usually 30 days will come out and do an inspection of the property. And they do it for many reasons. One is to make sure it's properly insured. Another thing is to make sure that the house is in good repair, has been updated, and does not have any hazards. And this is just a list of some things that we've seen that I'll go into more detail on a couple of them. But Joanne already mentioned the roof age, style, and material. Flat roofs are generally a prohibitive exposure with many companies, and I'll go into more detail on that. We'll talk about the age and other things affecting roofs. EIFS siding is a fake stucco, and this became popular late 80s, early 90s. There have been stories on the news where water can get trapped behind it and cause a widespread of mold within a home. So many companies will not accept this type of siding. It was improved after the year 2000, where many companies, if the house has had the siding put on after that, may accept it. It's a company by company type of thing. Many companies will also require a service contract for somebody to come out and check this every year and do a moisture test on it. Electrical panels. They want to make sure that the electrical service in the home has been updated. People have more and more electronics, televisions, appliances, things like that, which create quite a draw. And they want to make sure that the panel can hold all those different items. Stablock and Pacific electric panels were put in, I believe, back in the 60s and 70s. They can cause fires. And if a company sees that, the buyer or new homeowner is going to have to replace that electrical panel right away, because the company will not allow those two different types of panels. The other thing that's prohibitive is if you see fuses in any homes, those should all be out of the house these days and the electric brought up to code. The company rep, whether it be a company inspector or an outside service, will come in and 9 times out of 10 take a photo of the electrical panel to make sure that it's all operative, has at least 100 amp of power. It should have 200 these days, given the demand for power, and to make sure that it's all been updated within the last 20 years. Handrails, I'll touch on that. Most companies will come out, and if they see some stairs in the front or backyard, usually we see these with external stairways. If there's more than 3 or 4 steps, they're going to want a handrail so someone doesn't fall. They will look at basement stairs and the interior too, but normally those do have the handrails. We see them more where somebody may have put in a retaining wall or a garden and has a set of stairs either leading up to a side entrance to the home, but they need to be installed. The other thing is sump pumps, and when Ida came through here, many people who had sump pumps, they stopped working because the water just came in at such a rush. If you see a sump pump in a home, it's something to ask about, and you want to make sure that it has a backup either through a generator or a battery and can handle any water that comes through. It could also be a clue that the house does take on water from time to time because they have it in there. And now many companies are requiring these just to get a better policy or have proper limits to cover a backup or sump pump failure. Planned renovations, I'll go into more detail on that because that we need to have, there's some specific things that we go over with our clients if they plan to do any work or remodeling to the home. A high value home I'll use as a home valued over $1 million. Just about every company out there is going to require a central station alarm. So if you're showing a house, look for the alarm panels and see if the service can either be transferred over or mentioned to the potential buyers that it would be in their best interest to put it in. It is an expense. It does discount the homeowner's policy, but it can save so much damage, and it can also be enhanced these days to include some smart features such as a low temperature or a detect water leakage. Some other items that come up, and I'll discuss more about the claims issue.
Excuse me, Neil, we did have
Yeah.
a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is from Samantha. She's asking, is there a width requirement for the handrail? She said she heard 3 inches. Is that correct?
I have not been given any requirements other than to have something that someone can grab onto that's sturdy and can support someone's weight. I've not had any specific requirements on the handrails. As long as it's a sturdy material and can hold someone if they happen to slip or miss a step, they can grab on. That's a really good question. It's something that we may start to see, but normally it's the amount of steps that triggers the handrail requirement.
Okay. We also have a question. Could you expand on the flat roofs and coverage? Are new homes to be built with non-flat roofs?
My next slide, I will go into more detail on the roofs.
Okay. And someone else wrote, and maybe we'll touch on this later. How does one know if a home has the appropriate type of insurance?
That I can cover. We represent 12 different insurance companies. So when someone calls us and tells us that we're buying a home, that they're buying a home, we take a lot of information down from them. We get a lot off the real estate listings and then kind of fill in the blanks with a conversation with the prospective client and get an idea of what their lifestyle is, how big their family is, plans for the home. And then we tailor the insurance plan to meet their needs. If they have, say, a wine collection or putting a wine room in, that's something we're going to take into account. If people have like to collect handbags, Gucci bags or something like that, that's something we'll talk about. If they're sports people, we'll talk about insuring their athletic equipment. So I hope that answers the question. So no two companies are exactly the same. What we do is try to put the proper insurance plan together to meet our clients' needs.
Okay, and what was you had said this before, how many steps require a handrail?
Normally, it's depending on the company, I've seen it. Normally, it's either 3 or 4.
Okay, and then just one more right now. It says, does a home with no mortgage require insurance?
Well, there's no bank to chase you to make sure the house is insured, but you own a house, that's an investment. Even if it's paid off, you really need to insure it. If there's a number of things in a home policy, other than there's coverage to rebuild the house if there's a fire. Fires can be devastating, and all of a sudden find you have an empty lot and no place to live. Home insurance, you can tailor it to exclude certain things or not include certain exotic type things, and just go with cover the catastrophe with a large deductible or something like that. But if you own a home, you really need to insure it, whether it be a condo co-op or a freestanding home.
And remember, it also covers liability. So if someone
Yes.
gets hurt on the property, like you certainly want liability, and the liability usually follows you. So I can't imagine owning a home and not wanting to put insurance on it.
As Joanne said, you have that Amazon person who comes on the snowy day and slips on the front walk. You need the liability as well. So this is just the second list. These have been around for many years. Prior claims, as I mentioned, I'll get into because that has really changed how things are done these days. Dog breeds in New York. New York had a law that came out about 2 years ago that said that an insurance company could not decline homeowners insurance dependent upon the breed of dog someone owns. So there is still a question on the application. They do want to know if there is a dog, and very important, they want to know if there's any bite history or aggressive tendencies. So a person can now have that Rottweiler or a pit bull mix that they rescued, but it's going to have to not have a bite history associated with it. And there is a question on the application that needs to be answered truthfully on that. We do recommend people with dogs have fenced yards, that they get spayed or neutered, that there's a place for them to go if you have people over to the home. Those are things that we do talk about with our clients. Trampolines are, it's loosened up over the past few years. More companies are accepting them now if they're properly anchored and netted, but there are still some that will not take a trampoline and will force the homeowner to take it down or remove it. Swimming pools, those are something that have always been underwritten. They need to be fenced with a self-locking gate. And if there's any type of diving board or slide, that's something that needs to be discussed with the company. That some companies will take them, some will not. Proximity to the coastline, I'll go into more detail on. And of course, the old underground oil tanks. Many companies out there will not accept a home with an underground oil tank. And I know many municipalities today are forcing people to have those tanks removed before the home is sold.
Neil, I had a couple more questions.
Sure.
If a seller is thinking of putting the house on the market, should they get rid of the trampoline or remove the oil tank? Will the new owner get approval for insurance for the home before they are the homeowner?
It's two separate questions. Okay, on the trampolines, if the person comes to us and says they want to keep the trampoline, that will send us in one direction to go and obtain coverage from a company that is more lenient on them. and will allow them. As far as the oil tanks go, there are only a small handful of companies that will take these oil tanks, and it's going to severely restrict them as far as what companies will take them. My thought is, because many of them have been in the ground for decades, if the town has an ordinance about taking it out, or if it can be put in the contract that it has to be removed before the sale, that would be my opinion, that it should be removed and put above ground.
Someone's asking, and I don't know whether you have this or there's a website where they can find this, a list of municipalities that require the removal of the below ground oil tank.
I don't have it. I guess it's a case by case. I think more of the towns down here, if the tank is in the ground, it needs to come out. Most of the southern Westchester towns have that. I believe in northern Westchester, I've seen it be a little more lenient, but I don't have those exact towns. I think it's going to have to go on a case by case basis. And if there is an underground oil tank, check with the local building codes to find out if it has to be removed.
And we'll just take one more for now. Is it possible to get a rider on the policy to insure a house with some of these questionable features?
Oil tanks, no, that's a separate policy that has to be taken out by the insured with their oil dealer. It's not available through insurance channels. Again, trampolines, those are, if the company accepts it, it's going to be covered under the liability component of if somebody gets hurt. And of course, if it gets hit by lightning or a tree falls on it and damaged, subject to your deductible, will be covered under the property. So you don't really need a rider for the trampoline. It's more of an eligibility issue. Dogs, again, dogs are a concern because about a third of all liability claims do involve some type of dog bite or injury from a dog. But companies, if a company excludes a dog, that's not a company we represent. And I probably would not recommend doing that. But like I said, if the dog has no aggressive tendencies and no bite history, that's certainly something that can be taken.
Okay.
I'll go to the next, I'll go to our next slide. And here I'd like to go into a little more detail on the roofs. As Joanne mentioned, this is something that has become probably the #1 thing we see on our home inspections with criticisms. In the old days, they take a few photographs. If everything would look good, they'd move on. There have been numerous water claims over the years, weather related, either water gets in the home because wind blows the shingles off, or it seeps in under the roof, or there's damage from what is called ice damming, where snow and ice will build up. We have a freeze, it gets underneath the shingles and then starts to thaw and seep into the home. So these are all things that the companies are trying to get ahead of and have become very particular on over the past few years. They're now using drone technology and satellite technology to get a look at these roofs. We're getting close-up pictures of the shingles, the material. They're looking for things like curling shingles, loose shingles, areas that are worn, discoloration on the roofs, moss buildup. That seems to be the new thing. I've probably in the last 10 years, I've seen a lot of criticisms where they want the house, the roof to have someone come in and clean the roof of any type of moss buildup or discoloration. They feel that will cause the shingles to deteriorate and possible water damage to get in the home. So those are all things that we're seeing. So if you're out and just visually walking around a home and you see dark areas on the roof, that could be a red flag and something to discuss with the seller. I have one company that if that roof is one day over 20 years old, will not accept it. So homes built in the 90s with their original roofs, that's something to be concerned about as well. I have also a company that when we put in the information, somehow they have information on the roof and it'll come up with a little message that they want a roofer to do an inspection on it to make sure that it's in good shape. So there's a lot of things now, a lot of technology, a lot of concerns. So the roofs are a big issue with the insurance companies, and a person could buy a policy thinking it's fine. I'm not talking about just our companies, but the competition as well. We've had people come to our agency where they've gotten a cancellation because their roof had some discoloration or moss on it or needed some repairs, and the company they were with wouldn't budge at all on them. And we've had to help counsel them and get this thing addressed and taken care of. The rubber or rolled roof needs approval in many cases. These are materials used on a flat roof. Flat roofs are generally seen on, we see them here in Tarrytown on some of the older buildings. The company's concern there is that water can collect on those flat roofs and just seep into the home. Others have, don't have as much of a problem with it. But again, that could end up costing the home buyer more money because those companies tend to run a little more expensive taking those flat roofs. And a flat roof can come on many type of homes. It can be on an older home like you see here in town, built turn of the century, or it can be on a modern contemporary home. And so a lot depends on how old the roof is and the material that's on it.
Neil, we had a couple questions about slate.
Yeah, usually roofs, yes.
They said some of them are decades old, it's slate roofs. Do they need to be replaced also if they're over, say, 20 years old?
I've seen a slate roof that needs replacing because it was never maintained. The key with a slate roof is to make sure that it's regularly maintained, and that will count as updating. There are various different types of tiles and slate that can be used, and that's, of course, I'll cover later on. That gets factored into the cost to build or replacement cost of the home. But yeah, a slate roof is usually very sturdy. The key is to maintain it. And we're also seeing metal roofs today. There are some in White Plains that have steel roofs that are on it, and it seems it's pitched enough where if snow and ice collect on it, it just slides right off. And that, of course, is a less of a concern for the company.
And I don't know whether, Neil, you addressed this before. Lori had a question about someone buying a new home. Can they get the policy approved before they own the home?
With one of these concerns?
I'm guessing just in general. I don't know, Lori, do you want to elaborate on your question?
What we will do is in our conversation, find out what the plans are. If the roof needs to be replaced, I'll use that as an example. Now getting permits and getting a contractor lined up can take months. So what I would do is before they buy the house, get an estimate to replace the roof and a potential work order so that we can show to the company, and not all companies will accept it, but at least some will. And we can go to them and say, hey, you know what, you're going to do the inspection, the roof needs to be replaced. They're going to be doing it they have the permits in the works, and they're going to plan to redo it over the next 90 days. And, we would have to make a phone call and get pre-approval on that. Renovations. These can be a nightmare for both us agents and the company. By renovations, we're talking not just major, just a kitchen or a bathroom update. Many people during the last few years have planned to buy homes and go in and do a major renovation before moving in. And that can be a problem. We always counsel our insureds that when you buy the home, move in. Just set up some rooms, stay there occasionally if you're still living somewhere else, but occupy the home. If you don't move in and the house is empty, it is considered vacant and they're no longer eligible. It must go on either a vacant home policy or a renovated home or builder's risk policy. The banks for a closing may not accept those. They're looking to accept a homeowner's policy. Home insurance is the intent of it is to insure an owner occupied home. So if the house is not occupied or not lived in, they'll cancel it, and we would have to put it on a builder's risk until those renovations are done and the people move in. So the first bit of advice is when you buy a home, even if you're not going to live there every single day, move in, set up some rooms. If you need to redo the kitchen, stay there on the weekends, furnish a couple of bedrooms, watch some television, stay there, but occupy the home. We get some inspections. I had one the other day where they went out, the house was empty. They were about a month in, and without even asking what the plans are, they're going to set the policy up to cancel in a month. So we need to scramble and make sure that things are getting done. If you are doing any type of renovation, that's something we need to have the information on as far as what you're doing. And the other item is to make sure that they use a general contractor and get a certificate of insurance, naming them as an additional insured. Companies do not want do-it-yourself major renovation projects. Look, if you're going to go in and bring a couple of cans of paint and paint it yourself, that's what most people do. But if you're going to start ripping apart a kitchen or a bathroom and doing plumbing work and electrical work, they need a general contractor to handle those types of things. So these are things that, vacancy is probably the number one thing that companies don't want. Some companies don't want any renovations at all. And again, having multiple markets, we can negotiate with certain companies to accept redoing a kitchen or bath or possibly redoing flooring. But it's something that does need to be talked about. And if someone's not going to occupy the home for 6 months or a year, we would then put it on a builder's risk policy. Any questions on our renovations? Okay, prior claims. And this is a conundrum because in the old days, we would go and get the information, do our research, get some quotes for someone. And as part of our process, the companies run what's called a clue report. Clue report brings up past claims for the person buying the home, but also for the risk address of the home they're buying. If it comes up under the risk address, in the old days, we would just simply check a box saying these claims belong to the prior owner of the home and move on. If it was for the insured, it was usually for another location that they were selling. So they would give them essentially a clean slate. With the tightening of the market that Joanne talked about, now claims are being scrutinized. They want to know what type of claims. Was it a repetitive type of situation? There was a home that we recently worked on that came up with 3 past water claims on the home. And they wanted to know about the integrity of the plumbing system. Was it a plumbing leak? Was it because of a faulty roof? One of them happened to be from Storm Ida, and that was considered a catastrophic loss where there were widespread claims. So the companies kind of, it was a flood claim that was not covered. So that one obviously could be excluded. But they also wanted to know what the history of that person was and where they came from. Were they claim conscious, putting in small claims? Were they careless and had a burglary because they didn't have a security system or left something in the glove box of their car? So these are all things that are being brought up now that can be a problem getting home insurance. In calling around, there were a lot of companies that declined the risk and wanted to wait until these claims dropped out of the experience period. And the experience period with most companies is 5 years. So it's something to be concerned. Every new account, we do run the clue report and can discuss that. And it's also good information to know if the buyer is buying a home that may have a defect in it that needs to be corrected. So it does serve 2 purposes there. We'll be covering it later on, but claims, flood claims also can come into the picture and be used for both acceptability and rating, especially if the client needs to purchase flood insurance. So these are things that are a definite something that we would, as part of our quoting process, come up with and be able to discuss with the insured and see if that's something that needs to be addressed or not. Replacement cost, and this has become a very it's become more and more complicated for many reasons. Building costs, the increase in building costs, for example, and the increase in the cost to live somewhere else during a claim have pushed these numbers up. So the number one question we get is, why are you quoting me a homeowner policy for more than what I paid for the home? And that what you're insuring is what it would cost to rebuild that house with like, kind, and quality materials. An older home, those materials might cost quite a bit. The cost per square foot in Westchester conservatively can be anywhere from $350 to over $500 a square foot to rebuild that home. And, if you're buying a house for a 3,000 square foot house for $1 million, depending on what's in that house, it could cost you anywhere from 1.2 to 1.5 to insure it properly and get guaranteed replacement on it. Older homes also may need to be updated based on local building codes. And that's something we address as well and make sure that there's a provision in the policy for it. So construction costs don't always equate with market value. If there's a downturn in the market, costs can go down on the house, but construction costs can still remain the same or go up depending on rates of inflation, availability of supplies, and also delays in getting those materials. Inflation rates have also caused these increases. Every year, companies inflate the policy. Usually it was at normally 2 or 3%. It's now up around 8 or 9% each year because of the increased cost of materials and what it costs to rebuild the home. We talked about supply chain issues. You may need a certain type of tile for your bathroom or flooring for the house or cabinetry, and those can take months to get. And shortages. During the pandemic, the cost of wallboard went up, and sometimes you could go to Home Depot just to get plywood and wallboard and find that their supplies were low and they weren't coming in for 2 or 3 weeks. So that can really create and increased costs of settling a claim over time. So these are things that can help that determine how the replacement cost is calculated. We have a program that we use that's zip code based, because certain areas it's going to cost more based on local codes than other areas. For instance, a home on the island may have to have certain types of roofing or hurricane-proof glass, or doors that withstand certain winds, where up here you could probably put in a normal a wooden door and it would cost a lot less. So those are all calculated in, and can also cause a little bit of sticker shock sometimes in this area.
Neil, I had a couple more questions.
Sure.
Someone is asking, how does renting your home affect the insurance policy?
So renting a home, that's a really good question. Renting a home means it's not going to go on a homeowner's form, because again, homeowner's insurance is for an owner occupied home. So when a house is tenant occupied, it's written on what's called a dwelling form or a landlord form. And in some of the coverages differ. It's something that I'd be glad to go over in more detail if you have some questions in an email, but there is a form for renting a home. There's certain eligibility criteria for it. It also, instead of including additional living expenses, will include a loss of rents coverage, because if there is a loss, obviously the tenant is going to move out and go elsewhere, and while the house is going to be fixed, it'll cover that rental income that they're going to lose out on.
Okay, someone is asking, can we request a clue report for prospective buyers?
We'd like to talk to the buyer directly, because we do need some information from them. We would need a name and a date of birth and a prior address, and that will allow us to do an accurate, and the address of the home they're buying.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So here's just a quick list. I've talked about ways that the why costs are going up. Well, here's some ways to save on the insurance. One is to package it with your auto policy. Bundling can definitely save money on both policies. Anywhere, depending on the company, it can be anywhere from 5 to 15% on each policy, and they usually give a bigger discount on the homeowner. Increasing your deductibles, and this goes for many reasons. One, it keeps the costs down, but small claims these days can really, really cause problems, either by increasing rates or possibly being non-renewed if you put in more than 1 or 2 claims. Companies have gotten very strict on it. If they see 2 claims that are related, they're definitely going to review it. So having a higher deductible these days can definitely save on that. And there are some companies that might even waive the deductible for large claims, and that's something we can look at. I mentioned before about the central station monitored burglar and fire alarms. Well, now there are a lot of smart features that can be incorporated in it. If someone's putting in a new system, we tell them to add the temperature, because if they travel the pipes, you will know if it's getting too cold, and you can have somebody check on the home, because that can help if the temperature goes out, avoid pipes freezing. And that's something that seems to happen every winter, given some of the severities of the low temperatures. Water leak detectors, there's a couple of different types. Some are sold at Home Depot or on Amazon, and they're little sensors that can run off the Wi-Fi in the house and hook up to your phone. So if you know if all of a sudden there's a leakage from a hot water heater or under a sink or near a toilet, you would know about it and can have somebody get there and turn the water off. Or what's even better, and not all companies have this yet, but it's becoming a very popular discount, is an automatic water shutoff valve. If someone's doing work to their home, especially, redoing the plumbing, it's something we tell everyone to put in because it can save so much damage. If there's ever a ruptured pipe, it's going to shut the water down at the source and minimize the damage. And it also, the companies love them. There's various types made by Moen, Watercop, and some others. And, it is a cost to put it in, but it's going to be a credit on most policies going forward. And also a good feature when you go to sell the home. Hey, I got this water shut off in there. And that can give you a credit on your home insurance. Generators are becoming more and more popular. Companies are giving discounts when you put in the full, like a Generac, where it powers the whole home. The powered gas generators do not generate a credit, but if you put in the one that's hooked into your electrical system, that will generate a credit with most companies. And the other thing is security cameras, which are becoming more and more popular. If it, surrounds the property and alerts you if somebody were to trespass after hours or when you're not home, that can also generate a certain credit.
Neil, we have a couple more questions here. Does Central Station include monitored service by Ring, or does it have to be an ADT type of company?
Ring has a service where it is monitored. When you install one of their systems, you have the option of just having it go to your phone, which is a local alarm. There might be a small credit in there, but Ring also has a monitoring service, which will monitor the burglar and fire. And if you hook it up to them, you'll get the full discount, which is usually anywhere from 12 to 15%.
Okay. And then someone's asking about septic. Will inspections on a home with a septic tank have to be done before getting insurance?
They don't normally ask about the septic tank, but it is something that a buyer may want to inquire about, because I grew up in a home with one and they can go, and it's a job to put a new one in. So it is worth talking about.
Okay, thanks.
All right. We'll go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it back over to Joanne. She's going to talk about flood insurance, which has been ever changing.
Okay, so flood insurance is it's a topic that's not only impacting a homeowner who is in a flood zone, but it can actually impact people who are not in a flood zone. So there are many changes that FEMA did when they came out with their 2.0, and some of it is transparent, a lot of it is not transparent. And while they tell you that you don't need flood zones anymore, the banks know very well that they need to use those flood zones. They need to know whether a home is in a flood zone or not. So the banks are still using them. While we're not using them when we're rating it, behind the scenes, the insurance companies, they're using them. So elevation certificates are not required, but yet we do recommend, if someone's in a flood zone, that to get one, because it still can help with the rate. The problem with the elevation certificates is that it doesn't always help. And so you might spend $1,000 for an elevation certificate and then find out that it's not going to give you any credit because you're below the base flood zone. The occupancy, if it's a secondary home, automatically the rate is going to be higher. FEMA will give credits if it's owner occupied. So occupancy impacts the rate. The walkout basement or a below ground basement impacts the rate. As you can imagine, if it's in below ground and the water gets in, it really can't get out unless you pump it out. So those are factors that impact the rate. The year built, whether it's pre-firm, which is when FEMA started flood insurance, or whether it's post-firm, impacts the rate. Private flood insurance is available in other states. But in New York, it's really slow coming. We have a couple of companies that are writing it. The high-end companies like Chubb and Cincinnati and Pure, they have private flood insurance, but that's not available for homes that are under $1 million. In fact, those companies, most of them are increasing it to 1.5 million before they'll even consider giving you a quote. So the private flood rates, Aon is writing it in New York, but every time I've looked at them, the rates have been significantly more than FEMA's rates. So in New York, unfortunately, FEMA is mostly what we're using. What I don't like about the FEMA rates is that if there is a loss and they come in and the cabinets are all destroyed on the bottom, and yet your top ones aren't, they do not match them. So most people are going to want to rip out all the cabinets and put in cabinets that match. So there are a lot of problems with the FEMA product, but the way FEMA looks at it is that their job is to get you back in your home, and they're not looking to make you whole. They're just trying to get you back in your home. So it's not always what people expect it to be. The condos now, this is something new that you need to know. It used to be if the association insured the condo building, that the condo buyer, the unit owner, could not purchase coverage for the interior of their unit because the master policy was supposed to be covering it. That has changed, and now they can buy coverage for the interior of their own unit. And so we're finding that the banks are now requiring flood insurance for condos when they're getting a mortgage. So something to keep in mind. Again, that's in flood zones where we will run flood zones for you. I know a lot of you have maps available. It's sometimes a little dicey figuring out whether it is in a flood zone or not, but we're happy to run those for you. We have a service that will do it. We don't charge you for it. We'll give you not only the flood zone that it's in, but there's a really nice background document that comes that tells you how many floods have been in the area, what the percentage of chance of it happening is. And I think it's a nice document to give a buyer that, gives them an idea of what to expect when they buy that home and whether or not they should buy flood. We definitely encourage homes that are not in flood zones to buy the insurance. And, as I will say to people, until you know the topography, until you know how a heavy rainstorm is going to run, buy it for a year. Just know that, you have that protection. You can always cancel it after a year, but you don't know what your neighbors are doing. If they put in a new driveway that has curbs that's pushing the water a different way, if somebody built a new home, put an addition on, all those things change the way the water runs. So it's just a safety feature to buy that flood insurance when they buy a home, whether they're in a flood zone or not. Water backup coverage. I'm gonna go to water backup, which is it's not flooding. It's if the water backs up through a drain in a basement. You could have a sump pump that fails and the water comes up through it. You could have a sewer clog and the sewage comes up through it. All of those things are covered under water backup. We don't sell a policy without that coverage. That is so important. That's the fine line between, is it a flood, isn't it a flood? And it puts the onus on your insurance company to come in and say why it wouldn't be a water backup. We've had so many claims covered under water backup that might not have been covered under a flood policy. So it's not that expensive, and we definitely encourage people to get as much coverage as they can under the water backup. 50,000 is usually the most you can get. Some companies only sell 20 or even 10,000, but we prefer to have 50,000 on policies. I will tell you, we recently had it happen in this office building, and what I would have thought might not have been much of a claim was well over $20,000, and that was just cleaning up the water because there isn't anything in our basement. So if you have a finished basement, it would have been far more than that. So just the cleanup alone will can add up in what the cost is to sanitize. And it's so important, if somebody does have a water backup or has a flood, have a professional restoration place come in. They sanitize it. When it's done, you know that it's clean and that you're not going to have mold problems down the road or other issues. It's so important to clean that water up properly. Water is just it's crazy how mold spores jump all over the place, and you really want to make sure that it's cleaned up properly.
Joanne, we have one question
Sure.
about the flooding. Someone's asking, they've heard of places like Fire Island. Insurance companies will only insure up to a certain amount, but not the full value, because I guess it's in a flood zone. Have you heard of anything like this?
Well, FEMA only goes to 250,000, and that's the max that they insure. But there is excess flood insurance that you can buy. So there are many companies that sell the excess flood insurance, and the cost of it, it varies. It depends on where you are and what the chances are of having damage over the 250,000. If you consider, if you have a ranch that has it's on a slab, well, then you have much more chance of a lot of damage versus a 2-story home that has a basement or has a crawl space, because at least the water has somewhere to go before it starts damaging the home. So all of those factors make a difference, but you can buy more than 250,000. It's sold through the excess market.
Someone is also asking about mold insurance, and is mold cleanup included, I guess, if you do need a cleanup?
So if you had a pipe break, or if you had a water backup, and then you have mold coverage, then that's covered under the homeowner policy, or under your water backup coverage up to the 50,000. If you have mold coverage that is coming because of moisture, you have to specifically buy mold coverage for that. And most policies come with 20,000. But if you want more than that, you have to buy more than that. And it's pretty expensive to buy it, but it is available.
And somebody's also asking about condos, about the water backup insurance. Does it cover a neighbor's condo flooding? I guess like into somebody else's condo.
Well, I guess it depends on where the water backup came from. If the water backup is in your unit and then it damages another unit next to you, that's going to be covered under your liability coverage for causing the damage to the other unit. Some condos have like a shared area where that happens, and it can actually impact multiple units. So I guess it depends on the condo and the construction of it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for us today. I appreciate you all joining us. If there's any other questions, you can email us or give us a call. We're happy to answer any other questions you might have about insurance. I get multiple calls from people who ask me to run flood zones. We're happy to do it anytime. We have had people call about they're concerned. They think possibly there may have been prior water claims, and they want us to run a clue report. As Neil said, we prefer to have the seller contact us with their name and date of birth and their current address. There's no obligation for them to buy the insurance from us. It's just that we need that in order to run a clue. And so if if you have them call us, we're more than happy to get that information for them. And that will tell them if there were any prior claims on the home that they're buying. So with
If
that,
anybody, I'm getting a lot of comments about how great, somebody says fabulous, great Q&A, very informative. Thank you. Thank you. If anyone else has any more questions, you can put them in the chat really quickly now. Or if you think of something in the meantime, here's Joanne's and Neil's phone numbers and emails. You can send them, contact them, and we will be sending this out probably later this afternoon or tomorrow, the recording of this. But Joanne and Neil, thank you so much. This really has been informative. I love doing these breakfasts with benefits because I always learn so much with these. And it's really, I actually have septic. So when somebody was asking about septic, I was like, oh, wait a minute. So, but thank you. It's really, really great information.
okay. Well,
Thank
thank you,
you.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you,
joining
Joanne.
in.
Thank you, Neil. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.